Okay, good evening and good morning. So, welcome to lesson 10 of our Patanjali Yoga Sutra. So, we were discussing the Samadhi Pada. As of last week, we covered up to verse 10. And today, we will try to cover 4 verses. Let's see how much we can do. Because the sutras are very, with a lot of hidden embedded meaning. So we need to unfold that properly rather than completing the sutras. So what we have seen so far is the Yoga Sutra, the Samadhi Pada started with the statement of intent, because a committed student, for the committed students, Maharishi Patanjali is reintroducing the teachings of yoga in a very systematic manner. Atha yoga anushasanam. And immediately he started defining the yoga. He defined yoga as Citta-Vrtti-Nirodha. Citta-Vrtti-Nirodha means ability to gain mastery over the modifications of the mind, and eventually the ability to suspend all the modifications. Please don't think that we are suspending the mind. We are only suspending the modification of the mind. So to gain mastery and eventually ability to suspend the modification of the mind is defined as yoga. And then Sutra 3 and 4 clearly indicated the benefit of having the yoga. So if you are able to suspend the modification of the mind, the real seer in you, the real self in you, the consciousness in you will be able to recognize itself properly. Otherwise, what is going to happen is your self-identity will be mistaken with the mental thought patterns. So this is the benefit was described. And after that, Patanjali said, for you to gain control over your mental modifications, you need to understand. You need to understand what type of modifications are there. On a high level, we have seen that the mental modifications could be of 2 types. One is going to take you to the highest goals of life. And the second category is those mental modifications which you take you away from the path of good. Klishta, aklishta. And then he categorized the mental modifications into 5. The first category was Pramana. Pramana means the mental modifications that gives you the right knowledge. And the second one means within Pramana itself, there were 3 means of gaining the right knowledge. We have seen that. One is Pratyaksha, which is the direct perception using your sense organs. And the second category was Anumana, which is the inference using the logic. And the third category was Agama. Basically, it means Vedas, or in a larger context, it means scriptures or the revealed knowledge. These are the means for gaining the right knowledge. And then Viparyaya, the second category of Vrittis, means the Vrittis that creates false perception. For perception means you're mistaking something as something else. So you're seeing a rope and you're mistaking it as a snake. That kind of perception is known as Viparyaya. So you're seeing something. It's not that you don't have something. You're perceiving something, but you're mistaking it. That is called Viparyaya. And the third category is known Vikalpa. Vikalpa means it is imagination. Imagination means you're not seeing something, but you're making sure that you're thinking something, right? So imagination, like all the creative thinking. So you have never experienced that, but you're thinking about a new possibility. Or so you're falsely superimposing something. And that can create a certain type of vrittis, and that is known as Vikalpa. And then we talked about another category of vrittis, which is called sleep. And we had an extensive discussion whether sleep can be considered as a vritti. And we said, per the yoga model, the sleep is considered as putting a black veil over the content of your mind. Your content of the mind could be anything like sattva rajas, but a tamas cover is put. So actually, it's like switching off the lamp in a light in a room. So if the room has so many great things, but if there is no light, you cannot see it. So just like that, a vritti is added, which is kind of a tamasic vritti, which covers all the content of the mind. And that is what is known as sleep, dreamless sleep. And that is why it is known as a vritti. So that much we have seen. And we need to see one more type of vrittis, memories, and after that we need to proceed. Any questions or comments? Otherwise, we can continue with the next sutra. Okay, so that's great. So if that is the case, let's listen to Sutra 11, which is the final type of vrittis.
anubhUtaviShayaasampramoshaH smRutiH.
Another beautiful sutra. anubhUtaviShayaasampramoshaH smRutiH. So please understand where we stand now. We are talking about the 5 categories of vritti, one way of dicing and slicing the vrittis, because our focus is to control these vrittis or gain mastery over these vrittis. For that, we need to understand what are the different categories of vritti. So far, we have seen pramana, viparya, vikalpa, nidra. Correct vrittis that gives the correct knowledge, the vrittis that gives the incorrect knowledge, and the vrittis that gives imagination, and the vrittis that makes you sleep. And one more category is there. Anubhuta vishaya asampramoshaH smRutiH. smRutiH means memories. smriti, memories. Asampramosha. Sampramosha means not retaining. AsampramoshaH means it is retaining, not giving away. That is what it is. So if you don't give away the experience you had, for example, suppose you went to, say, Switzerland last year. If you retain that thoughts in your mind, that is what is known as asampramosha. It means retention. So smriti is the retention of what? Vishaya, whatever sense experience you had in the past. So smriti is the retention of the sense experience anubhutaha you had experienced in the past. So it need not be physically experienced. In the imagination itself you have experienced. If you retain that, that is also known as smriti. It's very straightforward. So I can close my eyes and I can think about an experience I had encountered in the past, right? All of you, I'm sure, think about 9/11. That day you can visualize it right now, even now, where you were, what happened, what feelings you had. We have moved far away from 9/11, almost 20 years. But still, that memories are in our mind. That's exactly what it is. So at that point of time, when I was experiencing that situation, some vrittis happened, and that impression was retained in my mind. And at will, I can go back and pull it out. When I pull it out, what happens? That will create a set of vrittis, and that vrittis is known as smriti. Very straightforward, pretty much aligned with the psychology. So this is what it is. It is the recollection of experience. It is another type of vrittis where instead of, typically if I see, usual my experiences are what? It is based upon a sensory input. Smriti means it is not based upon a sensory input. It is pulling from my own memory. So memory is a sum total of whatever I can remember. It is stored there, and it is the past experience. So this is what it is. It is very straightforward, nothing complicated. Whatever past experience in the past, it is stored in my system, and at will I can recollect it, and that will create a modification in my chitta, and that chitta is known as memory. Only one addition here I would like to mention here is that sleep. The sleep is, again, it is coming from my subconscious mind or the unconscious mind. So it is not, when we talked about the sleep last time, it was not covering this dream state. So the dream state is nothing. It is based upon what I stored in my memory. I create some possibilities. So that's it. So these 5 dicing and slicing it gives me the different types of vrittis I need to master. So let's take a pause. What is yoga? Is the ability to gain mastery over my vrittis, gain control over my vrittis, and finally, ability to suspend these vrittis. But if I need to know that, I need to understand the vrittis. And we saw two types of dicing and slicing, right? In the first sutra, we saw the vrittis or the mental states, the vrittis that can lead the mind is led to 5 categories: Chitta, Vikshipta, Mudha, Ekagra, and Nirodha. And here we saw another type of 5 categories of vrittis. These are 2 different dicing and slicing. Each of this will understand me to gain mastery of these mental activities. So now we are going, since we've got an understanding of the different kinds of vrittis. What are all the different kinds of vrittis? My mind can have Chitta-Vrukti. Chitta-Vrukti means the spinning of my mind that can take my mind into an extremely destructive mode. It's like a tsunami. If you visualize the chitta like a pool, let's say that an avalanche of waves comes in. That's what it is. So when that comes in, you don't, means it is completely disturbed and it is in a very bad state. That is Chitta-Vrukti. Vikshipta-Vrukti means it is still, but occasionally some ripples comes. That is what is Vikshipta. Mudha means what? It is stagnant. It is extremely stagnant and it is corrupt. So it is, you won't see the bottom of the lake properly. Ekagra means it is quietened, it is stilled. Nirodha means completely mastered. So these are the one way of dicing and slicing the vritti. Another way of dicing and slicing means depending upon the function of the vritti. The first one is depending upon the state of the vritti. That vrittis will lead me to a particular state of mind. That is the Chitta-Vritti, Vikshipta-Vritti, Mudha-Vritti, Ekagra-Vritti, Nirodha-Vritti. The second category of dicing and slicing means it is based upon the function of that vritti. So sometimes the function of the vritti, a spin happens in my mind that gives me the correct knowledge. That is called a Pramana vritti. So within Pramana vritti is something is Pratyaksha Pramana vritti. Second one is Anumana Pramana vritti. And the third one is Agama Pramana vritti. So some spinning of the mind can give me the right knowledge. That is what is called Pramana vritti. And second one is Viparyaya vritti. Sometimes what happens, the modification of the mind can give me false knowledge. Instead of A, I take it as B. The third one is Vikalpa. Sometimes a spinning of the vritti can take me to some new possibilities of life. Imagination. Then what? Nidra. Some vrittis can lead me to that sleepy state by putting some tamas cover over it. And finally, certain vrittis are formed when I recollect my mind. So these are the different vrittis. So we got a very good understanding of 2 different dicing and slicing of the vritti. So now the problem is what to do next. See, if you think about yoga, Citta-Vritti-Nirodha. So we understood a little bit of what is vritti. Now the focus is Nirodha. How can I make that Nirodha happen? So that is what is the next 2 verses, next a few verses. So let's try to understand that. So Sutra 12, this is one of the most popular sutra. It defines how the Citta-Vritti-Nirodha can happen. So let's listen.
abhyaasavairagyabhyam tannirodhaH.
So verses 5 to 11, the attention was on vrittis. Now the attention is changed on the word Nirodha. Look at the way how systematic it is. Like he is just unfolding one after the other. So abhyasavairagyabhyam tannirodhaH. Tan or tat means that. That means here means it is the Chitta-Vrittis. We are talking about the Chitta-Vrittis. So the different categories of Chitta-Vritti, whether it is Pramana, Viparyaya, Vikalpa, Nidra or smRutiH. So tannirodhaH can be controlled or mastered. How? He gives 2 techniques. One is abhyasa. Second one is vairagya. So abhyasa means continuous practice. Vairagya means blocking something or dispassion. So how can I gain mastery over the different Chitta Vrittis? This is essentially the topic of meditation, right? So any meditative practice, what you try to do is gaining control over the mental activities. How can you do that? Through consistent practice and through dispassion. So let's try to understand that in detail. So far what we have seen is the different types of mental activities are Pramana. And if you think about Pramana, you had three: perception, inference, and scriptures. So pratyaksha, anumana, agama. Then you had viparyaya, which is incorrect perception. Absence of perception, imagination, absence of perception, and memory. Each of these vrittis will form a particular spin in your mind. It's okay to have that spin, but do I have control over that spinning of the mind? That is the question. How do I gain control over that? So that's very important. So the goal of yoga means this spinning is pretty much limited to a control limit. Because if the spinning is happening without my control, so you can see an upper limit and a lower limit. And if the spinning of the mind happens above that threshold, that mind is not a yogic state. This is very simple. If you think about a vikshipta vritti, that is not yogic state. If you think about a mudha vritti, that is not yogic state. If you think about a chitta vritti, that is not more. But ekagra and nirodha are yogic state. So the spinning of the mind. So if in the lake, you don't want a tsunami, you don't want a stagnant, dirty water. What you want is pure, clean water in a stable state. So this is the goal. So the spinning is happening, that is for sure. How do I gain control over that mental spins? So yoga is the practice that helps the person to gain control or the mastery over the spinning of the mental activity or the modifications of the mind. This is the goal. And how you can do that, that is where the practice comes in. So now, this is very important. The type, we saw this, right, in the second sutra itself. What determines the different spins occurring in my mind? The yoga philosophy or the yoga school tells clearly that what determines the type of vrittis happening in my mind is the content of the mind. If the mind is dominated by sattva, definitely these spinnings are under control. If the mind is dominated by tamas, the spinnings are stagnant, dirty. If the mind is more dominated by rajas, then what happened? Extreme spinning can happen. So this negative or destructive or these uncontrolled thoughts comes from the mind because of the structure and the content of the chitta. So now, what is our goal? Our goal is to make sure that these spinnings are under control. So if you want to gain control over the type of vrittis happening in my mind, I need to reprogram or recreate or update the content of my mind so that it is more dominating, sattva is more dominating. So that is the goal. That is a simple goal. And how do I do that? Through practice and dispassion. That's what Patanjali tells in this sutra. So how to control the mind? So you can say that there is the way your mind programmed in the current world, right? It determines how the mind acts. For you to reprogram, what needs to happen is you need to, if you want to change the content of the mind, you need to reprogram your neural circuits. How do you reprogram? It is through the consistent practice. How do you develop a new habit? Think through that. How do you develop the habit of drinking coffee every day morning? Suppose you want to change that with green tea. What do? Initially, you are not feeling for green tea, but you do it for some time. And after a while, what is going to happen? You need green tea. Otherwise, you cannot move. So consistent practice is going to make you reprogram your mind. So two things. Suppose you want to replace coffee with green tea. One thing is you try to avoid coffee and you try to substitute with something else. So one is vairagya. You're moving away from what you are not desiring for, and you are trying to do what you are desired to do. This is what is abhyasa and vairagya. And through this process, abhyasa and vairagya, the mental activities can be completely reprogrammed and you can gain complete mastery over the mind. So this is the next slide is going to give you a little bit more clarity here. This is the most traditional example. The most traditional example tells that the chitta is like a flow of a river. Potentially, it can take two paths. One is a path towards samsara. Samsara means the world of suffering. And another means the mind can flow towards the higher goals of life, like the kaivalya. So at this juncture, the conventional mode is the mind will be dragged into samsara. What we want to do is we wanted to redirect that stream. Instead of going towards the samsara path, we wanted to redirect that stream towards the higher possibilities of life. So imagine that there is a farmer who lives on the top of a mountain. When the rain pours on the top of the mountain, right? So you can see the streams coming down from the top of the mountain. And if the farmer just allows the streams to go as it is, it can go and destroy all his crops. So instead, what he does there is, he tried to block the flow of the water towards his field, and rather, means if you just block, that won't work, right? One or two times, the flow will be on the same path, and after some time, it will break the bomb, means the block, and it will flow through that. Along with putting a block from the wrong path, he will try to create a new path, an alternate path for the stream to go. Initially, he has to block and consciously try to redirect his this flow of water towards the new path. This is exactly what is abhyasa and vairagya. So you can see that we put a block here for the means the wrong path, that is in the red color, and then what we are trying to do, consistently trying to move the other thing here. You can see that. You can try to put that into the higher path. So abhyasa is the consistent effort to redirect the flow of mind towards what we want. And vairagya is our effort to block our ability to flow through the original path. So the flow of the chitta can be in two directions. One is towards samsara, and two is towards the higher goals of life. And abhyasa here means I'm consciously redirecting the flow of chitta towards the higher goals of life. And vairagya means I'm putting a block. Whenever my mind goes through that samsara path, I'm blocking it. This is the two technique. This is the good old technique, and this is the event now. This is the technique. Okay, so now let's define the abhyasa. So the essence of the previous sutra is the Chitta-Vrittis has to be controlled, and the Chitta-Vrittis can be controlled through two means. One is abhyasa, which is the consistent practice, and the second one is vairakya, blocking, dispassion of certain things which I don't want to do. So now the next few sutras, he defines a little bit more what is abhyasa and what is vairakya. So exactly what we saw on a high level, this is the style of Patanjali. He just introduces the concept and then he elaborates. So then, because if you remember, the way the Chitta-Vrtti was introduced also was like that, right? Vrittaya panchatayyaha, klishta, aklishta. Then Pramana, Viparya, Vikalpa, Nidra, smRutiH. Then each one of them was elaborated. Like that, now also Abhyasa and Vairagya is introduced, and now we are going to see that in detail. But before that, any questions? Before we go to the actual Abhyasa. Okay, great. So let's go to the next sutra.
Tatra sthitau yatno'bhyaasaH.
The next two sutras defines the Abhyasa. What do you mean by the practice? It tells tatra sthitau yatno'bhyaasaH. Tatra sthitau yatno'bhyaasaH. So he defines Abhyasa. Abhyasa means the effort or the practice. Abhyasa means the practice is what? Yatnaha. Yatnaha means effort, consistent effort. So Abhyasa is the effort for what? Sthitau. Sthitau means stable, controlled. So for being firmly established in what? Tatra sthitau, Citta-Vrtti-Nirodha. So it is the effort to gain a stable mind. That is what is Abhyasa. So Abhyasa is the effort you put to gain a stable, fixed, concentrated mind. Very simple, but you can think about this in the seat of meditation. What is Abhyasa? Ability to keep my mind on the breathing. Ability to keep my mind, the effort you put to keep your mind on the image of Lord Shiva. The ability to keep your mind focused on the mantra. So tatra sthitau, to a stable state of the mind. So in the case of pranavikshanam, the stable state of mind is your ability to focus on your breathing. In the case of imagining the form meditation, it is your ability to keep the mind at the form of Lord Shiva. So effort you put to keep your mind in your object of meditation is known as Abhyasa. Very simple. Whenever means your mind moves away from that stable source, you will have to bring it back. Later you will see. That is the whole essence of meditation. So the first definition of Abhyasa is tatra sthitau yatno'bhyaasaH. To keep the vrittis, into a stable state. The effort you put to keep the vrittis in a stable state is known as Abhyasa. Tatra sthitau yatno'bhyaasaH. Let's see a little bit more. One more sutra, because these sutras are related. The next sutra also defines what is Abhyasa. So let's listen to the sutra.
Satu dIraghakaalanairantaryasatkaaraasevito dRuDhabhUmiH.
Beautiful, right? So he tells Satu dirghakala nairantarika satkara sevito dRuDhabhUmiH. It's beautiful. dRuDhabhUmiH. dRuDhabhUmiH means, it means the stable state of mind. A stable state of chitta is achieved. How? Sa means practice, Abhyasa. It firmly reaches the stability when sevita, when it is cultivated, when it is practiced, when this practice is undertaken. For what? Dirghakala, not just 1 or 2 days, for a continuous period of time, for a sufficient period of time. Then what? Nairantarika. So you can say that I've been practicing yoga for 20 years. Every month, I go to a yoga class and I do that. That's not what. Nairantaryasatkaaraasevito, uninterruptedly, daily if possible. Then sevita, with devotion and reverence. So if you undertake this practice of meditation for a sufficient period of time, long period of time, with consistently, not that I do for 4 days and then I don't do for 1 month and then I come back and do for 4 days, that won't work. If I take this meditative practice of yoga for a sufficiently long period of time, and if I do that consistently, and if I do that with reverence and devotion, yes, your mind will reach in a stable state. So Sutra 13 and 14 defines what? This, what you call the abhyasa. The abhyasa is defined in these two sutras. And the first sutra defined tatra sthitau yatno'bhyaasaH means abhyasaH. It is the effort you put to stabilize the mind is known as abhyasa. And this effort, how should you put the effort? It has to be dIraghakaalanairantaryasatkaaraasevito, means sufficient period of time, nairantaryasatkaaraasevito, regularly, asadbhava-sevita, with an earnest devotion. When you practice, the chittas will reach the stable state. It's beautiful, beautiful. It's the way he conceived is very good. So let's try to understand. So the abhyasa means it is the practice you do to gain the stability and control over the mind. That is the best definition. So what you need to recognize is that a controlled mental state, it won't come by naturally. A controlled mental state, for you to gain the controlled mental state, you need to put effort. Yatna is mandatory. It cannot come by its own. The beautiful example given by the commentator Vyasa is, think through this. Like, you can also think through this. Imagine you have a very good garden, right? So you can consider in that garden, all the beautiful flowers are sattva, right? But the garden, if you don't look after that garden, weeds will come, insects will come. So consistently, the gardener has to look at the garden and remove the weeds and the insects. This is an example. That's it. So if I do that one day, and if I leave the garden for a few months, it will go back. So every day, I need to look at my mind, look at the contents of the mind, put some attention of thoughts comes to my mind, look at some attention on the behavior pattern of my mind, look at an attention, pay some attention on how the mind feels at all point of time, and try to do the proper things. It's as good as you maintain the garden. Just like you cannot cultivate a garden without putting consistent effort for the sufficient period of time, regularly, with an honest devotion. Because if the farmer do not have a devotion of getting the flowers and keeping the garden properly, it won't work. So this sutra defines the first ingredient required to restrain the mind, that is abhyasa. So it is defined as the effort to concentrate or stabilize the control the mind. Don't think that by birth I got that. No, you won't get it. That is why the meditation is a learned skill. Yes, some minds are a little bit more controlled, but with practice, with sufficient amount of practice, any mind can be controlled. And this effort you put to gain control over your mind is technically known as abhyasa. And very important, it is very important to recognize that a controlled mind is not going to manifest by itself. You have to put consistent effort. So this is the importance of this abhyasa. Now you may ask, What exactly is the abhyasa prescribed by Patanjali? You're telling me that I need to do practice. What exactly is I'm practicing? That is given in the second chapter, but a bird's eye view. So Patanjali is giving this Ashtanga Yoga as the practice. So what exactly is the scope of abhyasa? Per the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it is the eightfold limb of yoga. It is the consistent effort you put in these 8 steps is constitutes of the abhyasa. We are going to see that a little bit later, but I'm just giving you a bird's eye view. So the first one is yama. Yama means actually the 5 abstinations that you relate to the external world, right? So you cannot injure anybody. You cannot speak lies. Like the covetousness, you cannot follow, right? And brahmacharya, you need to follow that consistently. And aparigraha, you wanted to non-possessiveness. So these are some of the yama. Niyama means 5 things you need to observe. The first one is you don't need to do this. Second, niyama means you need to do that. One is shaucha, santosha, tapas, swatyaya, and ishvara pranidhana. Shaucha means cleanliness of the body and the mind. Santosha means the ability to keep the mind contented. So there are practices given. We are going to see all these in detail later. Then the third one is tapas, ability to put consistent effort. It's a willpower. You can call it that way. You need to put some, tapa means heat. Tapas means the consistent effort you put. And swatyaya, swatyaya means study of the scriptures. It's very important. Whatever we are doing right now, Yoga Sutra is the study of the scriptures, consistent study of the scripture. Ishvara pranidhana means surrender to God. So yama means you need to get away from injuring somebody. Second one is speaking lies. You need to get away. Asteya means you need to get away from the covetousness or stealing. Brahmacharya means you need to get away from going away from Brahman. Brahmacharya means it is usually translated as celibacy. Please don't think that way. Literally means Brahma means the higher reality, Ishvara or Brahman. Charya means you constantly follow with him. So the other path means what you are trying to avoid is non-brahmacharya. You don't want to go away from the higher. Imagine that you always keep your dignity and you always keep in the path of dharma. That's all it means. And finally, brahmacharya and aparigraha, possessiveness. I want this, the feeling that I want everything. So these 5 you need to give up. This is known as the 10 commandment of Hinduism, by the way. This is just these are the, some people used to call that, but you don't need to talk about that here. What I'm saying is that yama means 5 things you need to avoid. Niyama means you need to observe 5 things. And then asana, ability to sit consistently. Sthiram sukham asana. That is how it is defined. Stable and without any problem, you need to sit and meditate. That is asana. Pranayama. Pranayama means the breath control. That is another practice. Pratyahara means ability to withdraw from the sense organs. Dharana, trying to focus. Dhyana, meditation. Samadhi means absorption. So these are the practices we should do. Abhyasa vairagya. So what is the scope of abhyasa? Patanjali is going to give this in the second chapter. So if you go with the Bhagavad Gita model, it is pretty much same, but different names are used. In Bhagavad Gita, it is written as Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, Jnana Yoga path, which is pretty much same. And what is Karma Yoga? Karma Yoga means do the right work with the right attitude. What is the right work? You cannot, don't do the tamasic karmas. Along with sattvic karma, along with the rajasic karma, try to do swatik karma. And what is swatik karma? The pancha mahayajnas. That's exactly what the yamas and niyamas we talked earlier. And how do you do that? With proper attitude. What is the proper attitude? Offer all your action to a higher. That is what is the Ishvara Pranidhana talked here. And then what? Upasana Yoga is what is the asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dhyana, samadhi. So the Gita and the Yoga Sutra follows a pretty much similar path. So this is what it is. So once again, Abhyasa is written as the consistent effort you put to gain control over the mental activities. And it has to be practiced for a sufficient period of time, consistently. And you need to do that with reverence, and that will take the mind into a stable state. And what exactly I need to practice, and that is what is written as the Yama, the Ashtanga Yoga, the Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Samadhi. Any questions? Please don't lose the flow, right? So always keep in mind. See, something that, for example, a lot of people tell me that, yeah, it's very easy when you explain, but we cannot retain it. Easy to retain. You just need to follow the outline. So the outline is very simple. What is yoga? It is Citta-Vriti-Nirodha. Citta-Vriti-Nirodha, you need to understand that in its full scope. Vrittis means it is the spinning of the mind, and Chitta means the mind. So if you imagine the mind like a lake, the Vrittis are nothing but the ripples and the spinning of the water, and your ability to control that. And what you are trying to do is you are trying to look at the bottom of the lake, and when there are a lot of spinning happens on the surface of the lake, even if I look at the bottom, I cannot see anything clearly. What I see is only the distorted image of the objects. So that is what is tada drishto sarupe avasthanam vritti sarupe mitratra. So what I'm trying to do is to purify and gain control over the mind. And how can I do that? For that, I need to understand the vrittis. And how many vrittis are there? 5 types of vrittis are there based upon the type of state they are leading to. So you have the Chitta-Vritti, Vikshipta-Vritti, Ekagra means Mudha-Vritti, Ekagra-Vritti, Nirodha-Vritti. That is one category. Another one is you have Pramana, Viparyaya, Vikalpa, Nidra, smRutiH. All these vrittis I need to gain control over. And how do I gain control over? There are 2 things. The vrittis can be considered like a flow of a river. And if that flow can lead me towards the samsara or the sufferings of the world, or properly redirected, the same thought flows can elevate me and takes to the higher goals of life. And the practice here, the strategy here is block the flow of the mind from going down towards the wrong things or the samsara or the path of suffering, and redirect the flow of the mind towards the higher. And it cannot be easily redirected. For that, the content of the mind has to be reprogrammed. And how do I reprogram the content of the mind? It is through the abhyasa. And this abhyasa is the effort I put, right? Tatra sthitau yatno'bhyaasaH. To stabilize my mind. The consistent effort I put to stabilize my mind is known as abhyasa. And how do I do? Satu dIraghakaalanairantaryasatkaaraasevito. For a sufficient period of time, consistently, if I put that effort, it is going to give me that state. So, and then what exactly is the scope of the practice? We said for Patanjali Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, Patanjali prescribes this Ashtanga Yoga as the practice. And what is Ashtanga Yoga? It is the 8 limbs of yoga: Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Samadhi. This is the summary. If you have this flow in the mind, you won't forget it. Okay, so we'll continue a little bit more. The same truth was as, because I'm just showing you how the scriptures are pretty much aligned. So the Bhagavad Gita has a same verse, exact same verse. So after teaching, the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is known as Dhyana Yoga. So in the 6th chapter, Krishna gives all the techniques of meditation to Arjuna. So after listening to all the technique, so there also you hear the Citta-Vriti-Nirodha, the same type of definitions. Arjuna has a question, and that question is very relevant. That's why I just brought it here. So 6th chapter, verse 34, Arjuna asks, Chanchalam hi manam Krishna, pramati balavat dridham, tasyaham nigraham manye, vayuriva sudushkaram. So it means Arjuna tells Krishna, all these techniques looks very good. Whatever you tell, meditation, control the mind, theoretically, it looks really good. But the fact is that the mind is always very strong. It's always in an agitated state. I really don't want to do certain things, but I always will be forced in that direction. It's like a tyrant. It is impossible to control the flow of the mind, just like it is very difficult to control the flow of the air. Very true. We can conquer everything in the world, but if you cannot conquer your own mind, everything else is lost. It's very hard to gain control over the mind. Meditation, these practices are not easy. In our, even you can see yogis and gurus who have initially practiced. You can see the scandals they get into. You can see the problems they are falling into. Why? The practice is not consistent. It is not for a sufficient period of time. After some time, they think that, okay, I got the control. A false indication that, okay, this is good. And they stop it. And this will go back. It's very hard to control the mind. And typically, it's not that people do not know what is right and what is wrong. I know that eating junk food is not good for me. I know that eating healthy food is required for me. But what happens when I try to do? I cannot stop eating junk food. On the other hand, I cannot start eating healthy food. This is the problem. In Mahabharata, there is a famous verse by Duryodhana. Duryodhana comes and tells to Dhritarashtra. He tells, Janami dharmam, nachame pravurti. Janami atharmam, nachame nivurti. I know what is right, what is correct, what is to be done, but I cannot do it. I know what is incorrect, what I stop to do, but I cannot stop doing it. So this is not an easy problem. The gaining control over the mind is very difficult. So answering that, Lord Krishna tells on verse 35, right? Asamshayam mahabahu mano durnigraham chalam. He tells, you are right. No doubt. The mind is agitated and it is difficult to master. You might be a mahabahu, a mighty armed soldier. You might be able to conquer the entire universe, but conquering your own mind is not easy. And then the next line, he tells, abhyasena tu kaundeya vairagyena cha rihyate. But there is a way. And what is that way? Abhyasena tu kaundeya. With abhyasa and vairagya. The thing we just saw right now. Abhyasa, consistent effort, and vairagya, blocking from the wrong tendencies. You can do that. Exact same thing. Abhyasena chu kaundeya, vairagyena cha rihyate. Abhyasa and vairagya, you can gain it. And that's exactly what Patanjali said. And what is the thing you need to do? It has to be dedicated. It has to be continuous. It has to be focused. It has to be devoted. Satu dIraghakaalanairantaryasatkaaraasevito dRuDhabhUmiH. When you do that, it will lead you to the stable state of the mind. So this is the 4 verses we covered. I have a few additional 1 or 2 things, a practical step I would like to recommend at this point of time for all of us, because the Yoga Sutra class has to be followed by some practice. And one thing I would like to suggest here is kind of a spiritual diary you may want to keep. You wanted to track, because monitoring is the only way to prevent. Control implies monitoring. If I don't look at the speedometer of the car, I have no idea to keep the car within the limit. If I don't check my weight regularly, there is no way for me to control my weight. Everything in life. So one thing you may want to do is keep a log or something like that. How much time? Because even in the food eating, right? What exactly is the tools like Nooms or MyFitnessPal does? They ask you to log these things properly so that you can monitor and control. So decide what practice is good for you and see how you are practicing. So there is no point in complaining, sitting and complaining, say that I didn't progress. So one practice you want to start more than anything at this point of time is, I would say, start every day with a small gratitude meditation. Every day before you start your job or before your coffee or whatever thing you do first, before means something, reward yourself with something which you look forward to. If it is a coffee, for me, it's a coffee. So I try to do that before the coffee. What I try to do is try to think about 3 things I'm grateful. Another thing means, I know that if I tell you, if you want to meditate for hours, that may not work. But make sure that you do at least 5 minutes of meditation every day. And one more thing I would suggest you to do is, if possible, try to do a 1-minute meditation every hour while you work, maybe from 10 to 5. 1-minute meditation. Just close your eyes, focus on your breathing. Just be aware of your breathing and see that how the air is coming and going out. That itself is going to relax you instantaneously in between. Is it difficult? 1 minute of meditation, is it difficult? So what we said is gratitude meditation. If you have time in the morning, do a small meditative practice, whatever you like to do. And thereafterwards, just do a 1-minute meditation every hour, along with the other sadhanas you do. If you can do this much, how do you do? Dīraghakāla, for a sufficient period of time. Nairantaryasatkaaraasevito. Daily. Doing a 1-minute meditation every hour, doing that regularly, is that difficult? Not at all. Then sattva-sevita. Do that with meditation, means with confidence and reverence. Let this be a prayer of yourself. And yes, I'm not saying that this will give you to samadhi, but it will give a huge leap. I know that some of you might be already doing it, but if you don't do it, do it. This is very important. So quick recap. We covered verse 11 to 14, 4 verses we covered. The first verse was, we talked about the smriti, which is the 5th category of sutra. Smriti means memory. Memory means the vrittis are not created by an external stimuli. The vrittis are created when I recollect what I remembered or my encounters in the past. It could be a physical encounter, or it could be an imagination I stored in my mind. When I pull that back, that creates a new spin in our mind, and that new spin is known as smriti. So that completed the topic of the 5, another dicing and slicing of the vritti. So if you remember and recollect, we talked about 5 categories of vrittis: vrittaya panchatayah, pramana, the vrittis that leads me to the right knowledge. And under pramana, there are 3: pratyaksha, the direct experience; anumana, inference; agama, the Vedas or the testimony of the scriptures; and then viparyaya, incorrect knowledge or the false knowledge; and vikalpa, imaginations; nidra, sleep; smrutayaha, memory. And then Patanjali shifted his attention from vrittis to nirodha, how it can be controlled. It can be controlled through 2 methods. It is abhyasa, which is the consistent practice, and vairagya, which is the blocking of the unwanted thoughts. And then we saw in 2 verses the definition of abhyasa. We said the effort you put to create a stable mind is known as abhyasa. And this effort, what is the scope of that effort? It is the Ashtanga Yoga. Means yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. And then how long? How do I put the effort? This one is very important. Please keep this in mind. dIraghakaalanairantaryasatkaaraasevito. For a long period of time, consistently and with devotion is what is known as the nature of the effort. When you do that, it will take you to the stable state. That covers the topic. So what I will do is I will do the prayer and then we can go to the Q&A.
Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Shanti Shanti